Could the Loyola Ramblers' Final Four run lead to them being the premier men's college basketball program in Chicago? I think it can. As of right now, Loyola has arguably the greatest history of any Chicago program. Normally, something like this might seem like a knee-jerk reaction. But this is an interesting case. Surprisingly, Chicago's college basketball history is fairly weak. There are 6 Division I basketball programs that could claim Chicago as their home, and that's being a bit generous. Out of those 6 programs, you'd only find one national championship, the 1963 Loyola Ramblers. Now, DePaul dominates as far as tournament appearances go. They carry 22 of the city's 35 appearances, 4 of which were vacated, and have made it to the Sweet 16 in 10 of those trips, 3 of which were vacated. The total count is as follows: 1 for Northwestern, 3 for the University of Illinois at Chicago, 3 for Northern Illinois University, 6 for Loyola-Chicago, and 22 for DePaul. Together, Loyola and DePaul are the only Chicago programs to make a Sweet 16, much less a Final Four. While the number of DePaul's tournament appearances nearly quadruples Loyola's, let's look at what really matters: the Final Four. Whether you like it or not, let's just be honest. This is how programs are judged. DePaul and Loyola both now stand at 2 Final Fours. DePaul in 1943 and 1979, and Loyola in 1963 and now 2018. The 1943 NCAA Tournament was the 5th tournament held, and at this time only 8 schools participated. Win 1 game, and you're in the Final Four. The tournament didn't expand to 16 teams until 8 years later, in 1951. The 1963 tournament, in which Loyola became the national champion, featured 25 teams. So the tournament had expanded a bit by that point. Loyola had to win 5 games to become the national champion. None of their 5 games, except for a 2-point national championship, were close. In fact, Loyola's first round game was a 111-42 win over Tennessee Tech. That margin of victory still stands as a tournament record today. It should also be noted that Loyola broke ground in that tournament, starting 4 African American players against Mississippi State. This had never been done before, and paved the way for Texas Western, now known as UTEP, to start 5 African American players 3 years later in the 1966 national championship game. If we're going by NCAA tournament success, which many people would, then I think Loyola makes a strong case as the premier men's college basketball program from Chicago. If that isn't enough for you, then consider this as well. Loyola carries 5 regular season conference championships and 2 conference tournament championships, to DePaul's 2 regular season conference championships and 0 conference tournament championships. The point of this video isn't to laugh at DePaul. Honestly, I wish them the best. I think the state of college basketball would be even better with a really good DePaul program. Quite honestly, it should be Northwestern in this conversation, so the fact that it is DePaul instead is a win for them. But I think it's amazing to consider that a mid-major program like Loyola could be the most historic college basketball program in the history of America's 3rd most populous city. Even if Loyola loses to Michigan on Saturday, I still think that all of this holds up. And if they win, well then I think the argument only gets even stronger in their favor. So what's next? Could this propel Loyola to the Big East? Well, if they can show some sustained success over the next year or 2, I wouldn't be shocked. Every school in the Big East is Catholic, except for Butler. Loyola, as I'm sure you already know thanks to the newfound fame of Sister Jean, is also Catholic. Geographically, they make sense. They're right in the middle of everything. And without football, they're all in on basketball, like the majority of Big East institutions. Only Butler, Georgetown, and Villanova field football teams. It just seems like it makes sense. Remember, Creighton was in the Missouri Valley Conference just 5 seasons ago. Butler was in the Horizon League 6 years ago, and in the Atlantic 10 5 years ago. Marquette and DePaul were in the CUSA 13 years ago. This isn't unheard of. While it didn't happen immediately, George Mason eventually rode their Final Four run to the Atlantic 10. Then, in a climate more prone to immediate conference realignment, VCU and Butler were also propelled to the A10 following their runs, before Butler jumped to the new Big East 1 year later. Is Loyola joining the Big East likely? Probably not, at least not based on one run to the Final Four. But would it make sense if Loyola can keep the program rolling? Yes, it would make a ton of sense. And there's absolutely no reason why this can't be done in a new-look, watered-down Missouri Valley Conference that is missing Creighton and Wichita State. In conclusion, I personally feel as though Loyola-Chicago is quickly becoming the premier college basketball program in the city of Chicago, and the stage is perfectly set for them to continue finding success and possibly join the Big East. Thank you for watching and listening. I hope you found this video entertaining and informative. If you liked or disliked what you saw, please feel free to provide feedback below. This is the first video I've made that resembles anything like this, so any and all feedback is completely appreciated. Thanks again, and have a good one.